I'm sure you didn't really set your whole goal for the school learning about adaptive management and paradigm shift, and yet I hope I can give you some food for thought, impress on you a few things that we feel are important at our ranch, and some of them may fit into your operation, some of them might not. But if nothing else, I hope I impress on you the importance of diversity. Dave's already talked about it. About every speaker you'll hear today will talk about diversity, or for the whole school for that matter. The other thing I hope I impress on you is how important flexibility is. And so as I've been giving this for a few years, but when I first did it, I thought maybe I better look and see if I even knew what paradigm really meant and adaptive management. We've done a lot of things, we've adapted a lot over the years, but did I really know what it meant? So I went to good old Webster and looked it up and found out that a paradigm is a model, and I'm going to follow my notes for a bit here so I get this all right. A model or example. In my mind, another way of putting that is in a rut. And how many of us find ourselves, and there's a lot of young folks in the room here, how many of us find or look at the way dad does it, or dad-in-law, or whoever you might be working with, or the neighbors? There's a lot of different examples, but how many people are still doing things the way they did, like Grandpa did or Dad did? We got to sell those calves the same time every year because that's the way we do it. Maybe don't put any thought into why we're doing it. And to me, that's being stuck in a rut. And it may be absolutely the best thing you could do. But I challenge you to look at what you're doing within the operation and see whether that really is, or whether we are stuck in a rut. The other part of the title is adaptive management. And if you were to look up adaptive, it's to change or adjust to new circumstances. Well, none of us have had to do that this year, right, with the drought that we've had. You know, I think a guy should strive to be ready to change at all times. We never know what the weather's going to do. We never know what the markets are going to do. We never know what Washington, D.C. is going to do. And so there's always that unknown out there, and that's over and above little surprises like prairie fires, hail, grasshoppers, etc. And I'm going to talk a lot and relate quite a few of the items I cover to drought, because that's where we're at. You know, since this is a grazing school, we have to take tests, right? And you're a good hour and a half into it or so we should have a test. And I'm going to ask questions that there's not a right or a wrong answer to it, but everybody should answer it. And so I'll be watching, and if anybody don't answer it, well, I'll check with you and see why not. So I'll put you on the spot. So now you have a challenge to answer it. But how many of you are living in an area that's in drought, and you're dealing with it this year? Just about everybody. Anybody that isn't?
Well, we're dry and ordinary, but I'm in Roberts County, so...
Oh, you aren't dry.
I can't. I don't feel comfortable saying we're in drought.
I appreciate that, and the rest of us are jealous. But it is a problem. Okay, I got another question for you. How many of you think the drought is over? One. You're a brave guy. Yeah, big one too. And I assume the rest of you think it's not over, and I think that's a very good answer. Well, okay, so we don't know when it's over, when it's going to be over, how long it's going to last, but it's an opportunity to learn something from it. And I've been through a number of them, and I hope I've learned something from every one of them. And I'll challenge you to do that, because I could ask you again, and I won't even bother, how many think this is the last drought you'll ever see? We aren't even through this one yet. We continually go through it. Drought is more extreme in a lot of areas, and not only South Dakota, but the United States this year. And it seems to be ongoing that we have more weather extremes, whether it's drought or whatever. And you know, when you look at Sioux Falls's rainfall for the growing season, the last I saw it, they were the driest since 1894. And when you're sitting in a situation like that, I'm pretty sure there's not too many operators around there that remember 1894. They maybe thought they were dry in the meantime, but obviously they're drier than any of those people ever remember. So it does happen. We don't know whether that's going to happen again next year, or how long this is really going to last. And it's a kind of a scary situation. And I'll get back to talking more about drought and how we plan for it. I mentioned change and some of the change we've done. Most of you, or maybe all of you, aren't old enough to have gone through the ag crisis of the middle 1980s. I bought our ranch, livestock and all, January 1, 1973. Had been married for a short time, had our first kid not too long after that, lost my dad to cancer. That's change, trust me. When you go through those kind of things in your life, and those are things you need to think about, be prepared for, and hopefully because you are prepared, it don't happen. Well, some of them need to happen. It's all right to have kids and get married and buy the ranch, but to have challenges like major drought and deaths in the family that you weren't really expecting, it can really be a challenge. And we're right against things like having to deal with estate taxes going back to basically, under today's prices, zero if you were to have to settle an estate. And let me challenge you guys, as being a younger group, to make sure that whoever you're working with, or even yourselves, have looked into estate planning. It is huge. It can break a ranch overnight. And people are capable of dying at any age. I lost a brother-in-law at 42 years of age that was right in the prime of his agricultural life, and you just never know when those things are going to happen. Anyhow, we've went through bad prices, drought. 1976 is the driest year I've ever seen, drier than this year. We did a number of adaptive management things and changes. And one of the things we came to the conclusion of as we went into the 1980s, and a number of my neighbors were getting sold out or forced to sell their cattle or rent their land out, or depended on just what level they were at, how hard they were forced into making decisions that they didn't really want to have to be making, and did. So we were challenged, and we knew we had to change our operation or we were going to be one of them. And so we did a number of things, and I lump it into kind of three main categories of concerns that we came up with, and then I'll go into some of the things that we did to change. I'll probably run out of time, and I'll be around for the next couple days if I generate further questions. A lot of that question type stuff will be addressed by other presentations through the school. But feel free to ask questions anytime as we go along. So we soon determined that we needed to change, that we were doing things like feeding way too much. We were spending our summers putting hay and other feed up. We were spending our winters hauling feed out. And there's always a lot of waste, a lot of time, a lot of machinery expense, fuel expense, and it just goes on. And we knew we needed to change that. That would even be more dramatic under today's economy with the cost of all that stuff. And it was a real problem then. So we knew we had to change that. One of the other things we learned is that we were losing our biodiversity off the landscape. We didn't have any of our tall warm season grasses left. We didn't have the beneficial forbs and legumes that should have been out there. So we were concerned about that. We knew we needed to change our grass management. Didn't really know what to do, but we knew we needed to change. And of course, no doubt we needed to change our economy. But we went into what I call kind of three different categories of dealing with that. Number one, we started attending a lot of schools and tours, conferences, just like you folks are doing as you attend the grazing school. We didn't have the fortune of going to a grazing school. I actually hired a retired NRCS range consultant, much as what Dave is doing now when he has time between fishing trips. And I hired him. He came on my place for 3 days and did a whole farm plan for me, evaluated where we were. He's the one that came up with the fact we needed more warm season grasses in our operation. And we went on different bus tours, and we went to different conferences. One of those conferences was a program taught by David Pratt called Ranching for Profit. I don't know whether any of you have taken that or have had the opportunity, but if you do, don't pass it up. It's a big eye-opener. And another course, well, we've taken a bunch of them. Another one we took was Dick Diven's low-cost cow-calf nutrition course. That made my head buzz so bad. Both my son-in-law and I took it, and we both took it over again because it was just more than we could absorb as far as changing that paradigm and adapting to what he was saying. And so we took that twice, and the second time it really started to soak in, and as Dave said, we'll be getting to nutrition and minerals tomorrow. Took Bud Williams' low-stress livestock handling course. Again, a fantastic course for changing where we were headed and what we were doing in our operation. At the Ranching for Profit School, one of the things we had to do, and I should tell you a little background of what kind of circumstances I was in when I was taking this course. I was driving like 60 miles to go do it. It was in the winter time. It cost like $2,000 when back in the time when we didn't have money to be wasting on anything. I was doing a lot of feeding, so I was getting up like 4 o'clock in the morning, do chores, tear to this school, come back home, do chores, pretend like I slept for a couple hours and do it over again. Did that for 5 days. And I was getting wore out, and one of the things we had to do was sit down and write a vision statement. And I thought, holy smokes, I spent $2,000 to come to do something like this when I could be home working, and I found it very frustrating. I was about ready to pack up right on the spot, but I had too much money invested in it to do it. And I'm here to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that was the best thing I've ever done. It made me start looking at what I was doing, not only at the time, but on down the road. And one of the things it made us do is start making goals. What did we really want to accomplish? And we started basing our decisions on those goals. And I want to tell you a few of the things that we've done as a result of that. The first thing we had to do, well, I'll read you my vision statement, and I think Roger will get back to it again as well, but it's to operate a profitable ranch while improving the natural resources available and pass the ranch to the next generation in better condition in all facets. There's nothing in there about 800-pound calves, 400-pound calves, whatever, and it gets back to that paradigm that maybe we aren't selling calves at the right time, or managing our grass at the right time, or using our natural resources in the right way. None of that. It's a long-term plan, and we're looking like 20 years down the road when we come up with those type goals. You know, are we doing what's in the best interest of getting the next generation on the landscape? Are we doing what's in the best interest of the natural resources that are out there? And so as we started looking at those goals for 20 years down the road, we also came up with some, and some of these came from the likes of Will Rogers and Yogi Berra and all my heroes that come up with those little quotes that sound kind of corny when you hear them, and you think about them for a little while and they make a lot of sense on a daily basis. So things like failure to make decisions is a management decision. You know, sometimes it's really hard to make those decisions. They're not easy to make, and yet if you don't make them, we can't always live a fear of doing things wrong. some of the best inventions out there are mistakes. And some of the things we've done on our ranch that looked like mistakes at the time turned out to be good learning lessons, if nothing else. And so we need to charge on and make those decisions. Here's one of my favorites. Hardest part of a job is getting started. How many of us like to avoid those things in the interest of it's not something we really want to do? Avoid what it's going to cost is a good excuse. We don't like the weather. Well, we've never done it that way before. And you can go on and on and on. Here's one of my favorites, Gordon Hazard, a yearling operator. I'm not sure he's even alive anymore, but I think he is. Dave, do you know?
I don't know for sure. I think he is.
Yeah, I think he is too. But he runs all yearlings, no cows, and I'll make some comments about him later on as well. But one of his quotes was, and I took it directly from his mouth, if it rusts or rots, don't buy it. Think how much expense you could save if you use that rule of thumb on a daily basis. Well, now you're going to say, I can't get along without all that stuff, and you're probably right. But if you're thinking about that as you make management decisions and changes, there may be a bunch of it you don't have to buy, and your banker may be tickled if you don't. Here's another one of my favorites. Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And again, the power of the mind and what you do is extremely challenging. I invite you, and I don't read a lot, and I'll be honest, I have not read this book that I recommend you read in its entireties, but I have hopped through it and got the points out of it. And it's a book called The Secret, and it's a very challenging book, and it challenges you and demonstrates, in my mind, just how powerful it is. To use the last phrase I said, and they don't base it on agriculture, I'll guarantee you that. They talk about your marriage, your finances, where you want your business to go. It goes through a lot of different things, and agriculture is never mentioned in there once. But it all applies, and it gets to that power of the mind, what you can really do if you set your mind to do it. But I caution you, change is not always good. And just because you change don't mean that you should have. And so keep that in mind. I think so often of a consultant that told me in one of these seminars I went to one time that as he went out and consulted with a ranch, I believe it was in Wyoming, that was on the ropes, and that was in that 1985 period, and they needed to make some major decisions or they were done. And so he went out there, they called him to come in and consult. And he went in there, and man, it was a pretty easy fix in his mind. I mean, they were feeding way too much hay, they were managing their grass wrong, they had too many horses, too many cowboys, too much of everything. And he was going to really fix it up for them. And he made a bunch of recommendations to them and went home just happy as could be. He forgot to check with one item with them, what their financial situation really was, and he broke them because he was recommending stuff they couldn't afford to do, and it was a life lesson for him, obviously, but I challenge you to make sure you know where you are. Okay, so back to our operation and some of the things we've done. Some of the things we determined was a concern, a problem. Obviously, we needed to improve our profit. If you're concerned about the banker coming to your door, you aren't generating enough cash, and you need to visit why that's happening. Is it your marketing plan? Is it your expense? Is interest bill killing you? You went on 3 months vacation and you could only afford an overnight one. There's so many reasons. Lifestyle can be a big one. And I see it happen all the time, but I also see poor care of natural resources being a huge one. And also inputs into that operation. So some of the things we looked at, number one was our genetics in the cow herd. And I put this cow up here not because they have to be red to do that, or black, or purple with green polka dots. It don't really matter. They need to fit into what your goals are, what your environment is, and what you're doing as far as selling the end products that are going to be. This is just the harvest machine, and it's an important one. But you still have to generate cash from them, and it has to be in an economical way. One of the other things we determined is that those cows had to be easy fleshing, moderate frame, good disposition, and maternal. I didn't say heavy milking, I said maternal. And again, there's a big difference. You can put milk production into them until they'll run you right out of business, because it takes too much inputs to keep them going. So, and again, these are things based on our operation. Yours is different, I know that. But also, I've learned over the years that when somebody tells me, well, we can't do that at our place, I can probably go down the road a little ways from where any of you are and find somebody that is doing it. So it gets back to that mindset, that adaptive management, that paradigm shift. And in most cases, although some of this stuff won't be right for you, I would suggest that anybody can change, including our operation, and we try to do it on a regular basis. Planning is a big part of that. I'll get to some of this other stuff. I need to keep moving. One of the things we determined is, getting back to that feed thing again, is we wanted to go to grazing year-round. We needed to quit putting that feed up and hauling it around. And I caution you, that don't mean you let them starve to death or drop in body condition score and end up with a 50% calf crop just so that you can say, by golly, yeah, I grazed year-round. Last year we grazed all winter. It was the perfect winter. What's this winter going to be? Well, we're prepared for whatever it is. The winter before that, we fed more hay than we had in the last 10 years put together, but we were prepared for that also. But I want to show you something about the year before that, which would have been 2009-10. That was our winter native grass. You got a choice between snow and rabbit tracks there, and the cows weren't going to dig through it because that was icy, and there's good grass there, but we had up towards 100 inches of snow throughout the winter. We were concerned about that. We knew we didn't have enough feed going into the winter, and so I'm going to show you one of the things that I don't recommend highly. I recommend it as an alternative if you're backed into a corner, and only with a lot of management and a lot of caution. We grazed standing corn, and that wasn't picked corn, that was standing corn. And we knew we didn't have enough feed, so we left this particular field in case it snowed, and we stripped it. At harvest time, we skipped 16 rows, we harvested 8 rows, and went clear across the field so that we had a place to work in as far as fencing. We also determined that even 16 rows a half mile long were too much corn, too big an area. So we just went crossways in the field 2 more times and split it into thirds. And we got it down to where we knew we could handle 320 cows on an acre a day. And that was giving them about 10 pounds of corn a day. And it did get bad, and we didn't have enough feed, so we ended up using it. But our plan was that if it had stayed open, we had enough grazing, we just didn't have enough feed if it was a bad winter, and it was a bad winter, extremely bad. So we ended up grazing it, and like I said, 320 cows per acre per day based on 10 pounds of corn per head per day. And of course, you don't just dump cows into a cornfield with standing corn. We worked them up 2 pounds a day over about 10 days until we had them up to that 10 pounds a head before they ever went in there. Had our first learning experience the first night we went in there. We used single wire polywire. I should have a picture of it in here, and I don't. They broke out the first night. And so they were on full feed corn, and we had lame ones, we had off feed. is pretty darn scary. We soon learned that one wire was not enough, and we found that over the years, if it's really dry like it is now, or on snow like that, it's so insulated that it won't hold them. And so we started going to 2 wires, a hot and a cold, and that we never had any more trouble. But that's how risky something like this is. You don't do something like this and go on a week's vacation. I have a son-in-law in the operation, so that if one of us has to leave, typically there's still somebody there, except today. And for something like this, it's just a must. It's almost like milking cows. You got to be there to do it, and you got to do it fairly timely. What we did is we'd fence off 2 sections at a time. So we always had another one ready for 2 reasons after that first night's experience. Number one, if they did break out, there's another fence to stop them. They'd only get 1 more day's worth. The other reason was if we were in real bad weather, had an emergency we needed to go to, weather was bad, whatever, we always had another paddock ready to dump them into. Note the body condition score on those cattle, and you're going to hear about body condition score through the school. These cows came through the winter extremely good body condition score, extremely healthy, although we had a few long toes, calved excellent. Would I do it again? Well, I hate to with $8 corn, but if it means, this was the cheapest thing we could have done. Hauling feed in, hauling them out, whatever, it cost us, using a cost of $3 corn at that time, not 8, 60 cents per head per day. And I'll challenge anybody to winter cows any cheaper than that. I don't think it can be done if you're honest about land costs. Just something to think about. Dave mentioned diversity and biodiversity, and I maintain that goes a lot further than on the landscape and what you got growing out there, but that's what this is. Obviously a lot of our ground didn't look like that this year, but there's a lot of forbs there that some people call weeds. I maintain they're super important out there from the standpoint of a lot of reasons. Number one, on a drought year like this, some of those are deep-rooted. They'll be down there using moisture. It's important for the mineral cycle, again, because of deep-rooted, and a lot of those are legumes. They're helping your grass. They're offering a different part of the ration, if you will, for that livestock or wildlife or whatever is out there. We consider that extremely important, as well as diversity into our operation in the form of enterprises or whatever. If you only have one enterprise on your operation, I challenge you to be looking for another one. And don't do anything ridiculous. Don't go out and spend $1 million to do it. Just be thinking about diversifying your enterprises within the operation, whether it's cutting your cow herd down and running some yearlings so you're flexible on a drought year like this and for the market, or ranch recreation anymore is a huge thing. And one of the things we did is bringing Jackie and Adam into the operation. We needed to generate some income. We added a hunting enterprise. Because of our change in land management, all of a sudden we had a lot of birds available, upland birds. As we worked into that about 8 years, we were getting a lot of requests for some of the deer hunting when people saw some of the bucks on our operation, and we added a deer hunting enterprise, and none of this was planned. When we were in trouble in the 80s, that wasn't our solution for getting out. Our solution was changing the care of the natural resources, and because we did that, all of a sudden birds started showing up. The wildlife was flourishing. We'll get into monitoring. Dave and Dan and others will talk about monitoring. Birds and wildlife on our operation is one of the key things we use for monitoring, because if you're taking good care of the land, they're flourishing, and if they aren't, you better look at what you are doing. We knew we needed to improve the water cycle, and I don't know what a good picture of improving the water cycle is, other than green grass looks pretty good this year. You know, you could take a picture of a nice dam full of water or whatever, but we consider the water cycle the most important thing that we deal with on our operation. And it's not. It's not any more important than the mineral cycling, diversity on the landscape. You can go right down the list. Anything you hear during this school, this is not more important than that is, but I'll maintain that if you take care of the water cycle, you'll do all the other things. And one of our goals, again, getting back to goals that we established in the 1980s, was we didn't want any water leaving the ranch. We'd been through major droughts. We knew there'd be another one. We got one this year, and part of the planning we did back in 1976 is helping us walk through this drought like nothing's happened yet. But we don't know how long it's going to go, and we have a drought plan in place to deal with it if it keeps going, no matter how long it goes. And if that means total destocking, we'll do it. But the water cycle, where we're at, and our dry so often, is what we consider the most important. We also determined we needed to keep pressure on the invaders. Anybody have any brome grass on your operation? Yeah. Well, it continues to spread on, and when you think of invaders, the first thing you think of is, leafy spurge or Canadian thistles or something like that. But brome grass and crested wheatgrass are the two that we're the most concerned about. Some places it's cedars. We plant cedars. We can't grow trees in our country. We plant them. Most people are trying to kill them. But there's a lot of different things that are invaders, and so we try to keep pressure on those. Again, goals. One of our goals is to not let any brome grass go to seed on our operation. And so in the spring, as we start going through our paddocks, that's what we use as a key species. We key off of the brome grass and crested, but basically brome. When we've got that knocked down pretty well, we move on to another paddock. We don't worry about the timing as much as we do what we're doing to the brome grass, because again, these invaders are taking over the landscape. Fantastic feed that time of the year. That's what we got going for us. Any of the invaders I have to deal with are good forage. Fantastic. Use them. And we got others too. Cut down forage waste. Well, one of the things over and above not using as much hay and letting it rot in the yard was the way we grazed. This is Adam moving our yearling heifers. Looks like a pretty stressful deal, don't it? But the less time you're in an operation, and I maintain, or in a paddock, and I maintain that if you're killing the grass out in the corners of your paddocks, pastures, whatever you want to call them, or you're getting trails to the point that it's killing the grass, you'll see trails, even if they're there for a couple days. But if it's killing the grass, you need to look at what you're doing as far as grass management. Either you're staying there too long, your herd's too small, you need to cross fence, or all the above. And so that's a waste as well. Use cycles to your advantage. And which cycle do you want to talk about? I've already talked about the water cycle and how important it was to take care of that, but what about the rest of the weather cycle? Where are we at? You know, when we look at cycles as far as drought, we knew last July, well, not in July because that's just when the drought started, but by fall we knew we were in drier conditions than we wanted. When we were dry going into the summer last year, we were concerned about 2012, right at that point. Because we know from the research SDSU has done on our demonstration site, the most important month out of the year to have moisture in our operation for the grasses we have available is April. Now that's the moisture that's there. That don't mean it has to fall in April. It could be in October or January or March or April. But every day we go past April, we get that much more concerned. So if we're as dry as we are this year, we are really concerned going into next year. And we know that now, even though it's September and it might, well, rained a little this morning, but not at our place, just over there in the good country. How much did you have?
500.
Oh, I visited with some guys over south of Mitchell where I came from, and it was raining there just up until I left, and they said, well, it's not really going to amount to much, and I said, it's refreshing, isn't it? They said, yeah, that'd be a good way of putting it. That's about what it amounted to, but it was refreshing. So yeah, we don't know, but we know if it's like this yet next April, we got major problems. And so we start looking at those critical dates already the year before, and putting our drought plan into place. So okay, so it's going to stay dry. We need to do some stock reduction, or what are we going to do? Buy feed? Feed's a little high priced. We've got a number of options. We do things like early wean calves. We have wean calves as early as 60 days of age on grass, put them on creep feeders. But look what we did. We kept the calves, especially the heifer calves, got rid of the big eaters in the form of those cows, and also they were cows that we could afford to get rid of. There was something that they were on a list for, whether that was age, poor production, physical defects, disposition. Adam calves the mature cow herd out at his place, and he is tough on disposition, and I don't say a word because I don't want them beating me up either. And if they're wild or basically look at him crosswise, they're on a list, and we rank them. And some of the ones that we know are going to leave or are going to be the first ones to leave if have to, we actually sort those off and run them with our yearling heifers, and we breed them for or expose them for a short period. If there's something we would keep again if it rains, but we breed them for a short period. We got them separate. If it was bad enough, we could sell the yearlings and them and the calves before we even turned the bulls out. But we keep them as part of our valve. One of the other things we do is custom graze yearling heifers typically. Up till last year, we went through 2 of the wettest years we've ever had and didn't take any custom graze heifers. Why? Because we had too much ground underwater, and it was cutting down the amount of acres we had to graze. We went from that to this year. I had all sorts of opportunities this winter to take cattle in. Turned them all down. Why? Because we were too dry last fall and I hadn't seen any change yet. And so it's really important to be prepared and think about the cycles, whether it's marketing, reproductive, health-wise, weather, rainfall. The list just goes on and on where you're at. Another advantage, getting back to when we weaned those calves, we beat the rush to the sale barn with those cows. We've sold our cows, well, part of them, this year that we knew we were going to sell anyhow to beat the rush. Got like 80 cents for them. What do you think the cow market's going to be 1st of November? Well, I don't know. It might be 90, but I would bet it's considerably less. And so we got rid of those cows and what they were eating, and at a profitable price. Utilize what you have and manage for what you want. And it kind of gets back to put that pressure on the invaders. But I hear so often people that their first measure in correcting problems on the range is to go out and spray it or whatever. And again, just like this brome grass, it's a usable product. Dave talks about managing with fire. I can guarantee that would be cheaper than spraying in most instances, and is not killing the stuff that you do want out there. But there's a number of things, and I'll even suggest species diversity. We used to run sheep, and that was a fantastic mix. Sheep and cattle have enough different appetite that you can really control some invaders with sheep. And if they get tougher than that, then you need goats. They'll do it. I don't know how many people want to put up with goats, but there's a big value in goats as far as what they'll eat. And there's some people who really changed some operations around with goats. In fact, there's people getting paid to graze goats. They don't have to pay for pasture. They're getting paid to graze goats. in some of these areas that are sensitive to having chemicals or anything applied. Be sustainable, and that could be a lot of different things. Again, whether it's within, and of course I put grass up there. That's the first thing we like to look at and hope we're being sustainable with. Again, those natural resources. But again, it also goes way further than that. Whether it's in your amount of money you're borrowing, land prices are high. How do you be sustainable with these kind of land prices? Or should you buy any? There's other options out there, whether it's a partnership. You look around and we've got a pretty young average on this group in the room, but you go to the average ag gathering, it don't average so young. And there's got to be people out there that need a young partner in the operation or wanting to get people involved in it. And so there are options out there other than just going out and getting yourself so far into debt that there's no hope to. And I kind of look at some of these cattle prices being the same way. Maybe you shouldn't be owning cattle right now, or maybe you shouldn't be owning cows. Custom grazing for what pasture is going for right now looks like a pretty sustainable thing to me. I'd rather do that than buy cows at last spring's price, especially if you ended up having to sell them because of the drought this year. That's quite a swing at the bank. Work with nature. This particular picture is actually western wheatgrass, and it was close to a tank. A lot of hoof action there. And if you look back further, you can see brome grass. But in this particular case, it shows, and I don't know how you ever figure out what the right amount of hoof action is, because you're going to cause results, and sometimes it's impressive and sometimes not so impressive. In some instances, that could have been brome that would have come there because you killed out all the natives that were there. But this was just the right amount to really stimulate the western wheat, and I thought I better get a picture of it while I could. I wanted to show you this picture, and it's, I'll try to explain it. There's a fence goes right there, and that's a solar panel. And on that side, I think in 1997, 97, and I say I think because I don't keep as good a records as Dave Steffen does, and I don't know what year it was for sure, but I think that's when it was. It was just an experiment, and we were short of warm season grasses, as I've already mentioned. You hear a lot of times that fire or change in management and rest will bring some of these things that are missing out of the ecosystem around real quick, that they're there, they just aren't expressing themselves. And that's probably right in a lot of cases, but we haven't found that. And I maintain that if you spend 100 years with season-long grazing or abusing the landscape, you aren't going to fix it in 2 years, and you may not fix it in 100. So we knew we wanted to get more warm seasons, more forbs out there. So we went and harvested off of another pasture where we did have a big blue stem native, and we harvested about a pickup load. Had a heck of a time getting it out of the combine. It was on the wet side. It was fluffy. It was a mess. And we finally got it out of there and into my old pickup, and I thought, okay, now we're going to do something with it. So I got my wife to drive, and I said, go, just nice little clip. I said, stay out of the closed depressions. It won't grow there. Stay off the real rocky knobs. It probably won't grow there, and there's no use wrecking the pickup. So the way she went and kind of went around these swales and around the hill and back and forth we went, and finally got that whole pickup load of big blue stem thrown out of the pickup. I wouldn't call it planted, one handful at a time, off this way, throwing out the back. And the cows were in there at the time. Didn't see anything for so long that because I hadn't written it down, and you're going to hear about the importance of keeping records, I hadn't written it down, forgot when it even was for sure. It was about September 97, I think. About 5 years later, I was going through that pasture in the fall, and all of a sudden I saw little patches. It had froze. Little patches of red grass about this tall. You know how big blue stem turns red in the fall when it freezes? No heads on it, just this little stuff. I thought, well, awful little to be big blue stem, but it sure looks like it. And I hopped out and looked, and sure enough, and you could see where we drove if you started looking. There'd be a streak here. You could see where the cows had trailed the water. All of a sudden there'd be a strip that wide across there, just the nicest stand of big blue you ever saw. And I was pretty excited. I still didn't know what I had, but I knew, even though I didn't know how I had done it, didn't do it right, didn't do anything right, but it worked. And so things like that, low cost deal, we didn't spend anything on it. We didn't clean the seed, we didn't dry it, we didn't run it through a drill, we just moved it. I maintain wildlife can do that too, and sheep. We moved a lot of big blue stem around with our sheep when we had them, because we'd let it head out, turn the sheep in there. They didn't want to go into that big tall stuff. There could be a coyote in there, but they sure loved what was around the edges, so they'd go around the edges and get some stuck on their wool. And we got big blue stems and lead plants scattered all over a quarter of ground with sheep when we still had them. And so there's a lot of adaptive management things you can do and not spend a lot of money. But anyhow, now that stuff's heading out. It's expanded into patches. You can see where Carol drove and where she didn't, and we'd like to do some more of that kind of stuff. Be concerned with the resource. Again, when we shifted our priorities from taking care of the grassland, and I'll guarantee we'd be way overutilizing our pastures this year if we hadn't changed our ways. But when we shifted to placing our priorities on the natural resources, and not whether it was a 500-pound calf or a 700-pound calf, and yes, you still need those, and yes, they need to be profitable, but I maintain big isn't the answer to profitability. And so you need to be concerned with those natural resources. That's actually a tank. I think Dave mentioned fencing dams out. That is a dam bank. There's a tank right there that Sundance Artesian is running into, overflowing, going into the dam. You can see where it's a little red right down there. That's why. Don't be afraid to go against the crowd. And I put this picture in there because if you want to be talked about, do something like be the first one to use polywire in your area. Do something like go out and wean calves on grass with an electric fence between them, when everybody else thinks they need a railroad tie every 4 foot and at least 3 guardrails to hold them. Our cattle are so easy to handle and so healthy because we do this, and again, there's a fence right there. Adam, this was like the 3rd of December 2008, and Adam was standing on the tank that both groups were drinking out of and took that picture. And because he was there, they were a little concerned about the whole situation, so some of the cows came up and the calves came up and were going along the fence, but typically those calves were scattered out across the pasture, grazing away on grass that they were used to eating. It was the same thing they were eating the day before. Right next to the pasture they were the day before, and right next to their mother drinking out of the same tank. And we've never had a calf get out doing this, and we've never had a sick one. And one year we sent the steers to a feedlot, and I would never had nerve to do it, but they didn't give them any receiving shots. They finished them out and never had a sick calf. They typically do not treat any calves, and trust me, they like the way we wean calves. We'll take those calves in whenever the weather and lack of forage makes us. We bunk break them for about a week before they go onto the truck, and away they go. And last year, talk about disposition to go along with that, and lack of stress. Last year, Adam moved calves out of this pasture. He had to come clear up here and go around a corner and go back this way and out through a couple other pastures. 250 some calves in there, moved them by himself, mile and a half through several gates. It's unbelievable. They just have an altogether different attitude on life by doing that. Anybody that does it will not go back.
I talked to them about that. They've been rotating off 4 different pastures with 4 or 5 lanes of barbed wire fence in between. I said, try it. They're right next to each other. They've got water on both sides. You've got 3 feeder there for them. And he's like, oh, we can't do that. I don't think it'll work.
Do you have electric on the fence?
They could put it on it.
Well, he's right without electric.
But Jim, my dad and I do it all the time without electric. We've never used electric fence. We just throw them out. There's 4 barbed wires between, and we've never had calves cross.
And you maybe can, but I won't make statements like we've never had a calf get out with barbed wire fence, and I will with electric. I have that much confidence in electric fence because I know what some people barbed wire fences look like, for one thing. And
my dad looks like that.
Really?
Yeah.
Fantastic. So there, Julie's proved me wrong already, and you can do it. So you're set up to go.
But you said you know, your cow shot out with the corn with the 1 wire fence, and so it's the same.
No, I was one electric.
One electric, so
Yeah. I'm sold on electric fence, and Judge will talk about it. I just think it's a requirement in our operation. We keep barbed wire on a perimeter fence, and everything internally, except a few of the early on cross fences I put in, are electric. We just can't say enough about electric fence. So it even makes the antelope not like us. We used to have antelope, and they just avoid us. They hate that stuff. After he moved them last year, we did have 1 calf, and that had been about 2 weeks, that still figured out where those cows were, and 1 calf went back to the cows, but it wasn't in those cows when we moved them, and where he took them, it wasn't electric. So again, that shows my confidence in electric. Manage for wildlife, and I mentioned it earlier, I'll hit on it again. For a couple reasons. Number one, if you're managing the landscape right, you're going to have an increase. They're an important monitoring tool. They're an income enterprise potential. And the other thing is, and Chuck got scared and left, but he'll be given a presentation. There's a number, and not all of you are in the prairie pothole region, I understand that, but there is a tremendous amount of help through wildlife agencies and groups to manage the landscape in your benefit that also helps wildlife. There he is. And all it amounts to is they know that if you manage the resources correctly, it's going to accomplish what they want to do as well. It's as simple as that. And a very important source for cost share funding over and above NRCS and all the others that are available out there. Include partners. Again, just talked about some of them. NRCS, Extension, the list goes on and on. Some non-traditional ones might be hunters. I was talking to a guy in the last class. He says, yeah, I take hunters. Every day they hunt, they have to come help me 2 days. What a fantastic plan. You know, you aren't making people mad because you said no. They can come and learn something from the operation. You know, some of these, one guy he says is from Ohio, I think it was Ohio, far away anyhow, comes every year and helps him calve. He's a pretty darn good hand by now. You know, it's a partnership, and it's a win-win type partnership. And there's a lot of those type things out there. Again, we got to get out of that box. Break that paradigm. Be flexible. I talked about that earlier. Well, you can't get much more flexible than that. That's a 5-foot tank, overground poly pipe, poly wire over the top. And we like to refer to our cows whenever we've got them out and about, whether they're happy. Those cows look happy? Does that first cow look happy? Did those calves look happy? When they're laying around and don't care what's going on, they're happy, I'm happy, and it gets to a lot of flexibility. Drought plan, I told you I wanted to get back to that, and Roger, I know I'm running out, but we're going to talk about it a little bit. Very important, and this year proves it. Because of all the things we've learned from droughts since 1976, like I said before, we're rolling through this one so far like nothing ever happened. We had plenty of forage available. Stored feed available, grass available, water available. We have a tank with running water to it in every pasture that we own or rent. Because we went through about 10 years where we didn't have any water in dams and dugouts, and we had pretty good grass, but we didn't have any water. And again, thanks to our partnerships with folks, we've been able to do that. There's the drought of 2012. How would you like to turn into grass like that? That's CRP, and you know how CRP, if it's cool season grasses, which there's programs to do either way, and there's more emphasis on the natives now, but we choose warm season grasses because when do they release CRP? August 1st, when everything else is sticks. And look at the quality of that grass. Very little of it headed out, can hardly see the calves in it, green as can be. And I'll guarantee even our other warm season plantings that we've done on marginal ground did not look like that. It was stunted, didn't head out, just lack of moisture. But because of soil health that has grown in there, moisture reserves, plant vigor. Remember Dave's comments about the amount of cover you take off and overgrazing and stuff? August 3rd, 2012. How do you like the body condition score? She don't know it's a drought going on. She could care less. It was still kind of bothering me, but it didn't bother her.
We need to change. We need to change. How do we get other people, maybe the people with the money, or maybe our dads, or maybe our in-laws, how do we get them to change? Because this is what's important to us 10 years down the road, and if we want to start it now,
Yep.
How do we do that?
Yep, I hear you. Well, I'll tell you one thing. Number one, and one of the things I didn't mention in there, and I can't help you with relatives, but I had to change bankers. You do need people on board. I don't care whether it's the people you buy your genetics from as bulls, your feed salesman, which we're going to talk about, your banker, which we had one in the last class. I don't care any of those people. Your family, they all have to be on board when you change. No doubt about it, because you can't drive a square peg through a round hole. Now, the relative part of it, that's tough, because Dad's always done it that way. He's obviously been successful, or you wouldn't be there. And he's still in control, I suspect, to some extent anyhow. I'm in that situation, only I'm the other generation, and I try to not be that way, and yet I can share this with you. Having been through a number of droughts, I think I'm capable of giving some good advice to Adam, and to avoid some of those things that we don't want him to experience and go through the financial times I have. So it works both ways. Remember that first. Maybe Dad's trying to help you, yet I know what you're saying. One of my other quotes in here is, change is not easy, and the tougher, or the more over 45 you are, the tougher it is to change. That's pretty much a given. My suggestion would be, one of the things the Grassland Coalition does is have mentoring. And it don't really matter what part of it is. There's a list of folks, if you ask Judge about it, that you can have connections to. Take your dad or dad-in-law, whatever, to see it from other people. Talk to other people. They may not want to take your advice, maybe by showing it. That's the way I started. You know, it wasn't because Dad was doing it. I had to go see it. And there's a real value in that. And I can guarantee that there's people all over this state that have signed up, some of them in this room, that are willing to help you or show your dad the miracles of cross-fence weaning and some of those kind of things. And that goes for you. I realize you're quite a ways away. There's closer people than I am from where you're at, but there are people. I'll guarantee you I'd have had to see it to believe it, and I did. He's exactly right. There's no way it'll work. But I think it was the same year. I try not to go out there and disturb them, because then the cows come running and they beller, and then the calves come too. So I really don't want to be out there, but sometimes you got to. But I've got the electric fence set up so that I can be a half a mile away from them and check and know that I still got good power there. That's one of the big concerns, power and water. The rest I'm not worried about. So I was sitting there in the ditch checking power, and my neighbor comes tearing down in there. He's kind of a reckless guy anyhow, and I thought he was about going to run over me. He says, "What in the heck are you doing?" He says, "We can't hold calves in a yard, as I described before, with railroad ties and 3-4 guardrails high." He says, "How are you going to hold them out there? You're going to have cattle all over." I says, "Well, can't guarantee we won't because we aren't done yet." But I says, "I'm not worried about it. I worry a lot less about them out there health-wise and being gone than I ever did when they were in the corral, because all that takes." Here's another thing. Just think of it from a health standpoint. And I use this analogy. A corral, what do you got? You got mud or you got dust, and there's 10 minutes in between. That's pretty darn close. If it's a good windy day, it won't even take that long. And so you're avoiding that health concern, you're saving that work and bringing, that's all I can say. And we're here to help, so anything any of us can do to visit with him or whatever, we're more than glad to show and tell.
So it's mostly driven by location?
Okay.
Based on number of herds?
Not because of desire.
Okay.
Because we think that's the way you should manage it. Anything else?
Yeah, Jim, how do you split your cows and calves in that electric fence situation initially?
What you can't see is where Adam lives. There's a building site just up the fence a ways. And some people don't want to even give preconditioning shots when they sort those calves off. We do, because we think we have less stress the way we handle our cattle, taking them in and giving them their preconditioning shots and sorting them in corrals at the building site than we do by bringing them in once to give them preconditioning shots and once to wean them. We just do it all at the same time. The cattle handle easily. We take our time. We let them shuffle back out there. We've got a lane coming out of there, and the calves go on one side, and then we turn the cows out on the other side and leave. Shut the gates. So that's part of the unknown in there. I've heard of people setting up portable corrals, but where we do it, we have corrals, and that's part of your planning. Plan. We set up, and we don't graze those pastures where we wean, except at weaning. And so we got those close to winter protection if we're still out there and we get caught in a storm. We've got grass there, we've got running warm water, and they're close to building sites in case we ever did have a mix-up, sick calves, and as a place to sort them off and give the preconditioning shots. It's all right there together.